Well, we're delighted you're listening tonight. This is Barry Burnett, your host of Investing Insights with Barry Burnett, and this is not your average radio talk show on housing and issues along those lines. That's great. Housing shows, radio housing shows, they talk about mortgage rates and fluffy and frilly things, putting in new windows and energy conservation. That's wonderful stuff. But this show is designed for entrepreneurial investors, how to live your life and not have your properties own you, how to run your particular real estate investments stronger, safer, smarter. And in keeping with that, the material, the curriculum, if you will, on tonight's show is on mediation. And, you know, nobody wants to get crossed up. Nobody wants to get sideways with another person. Nobody's really out there just itching for a fight. So Bob Andersen is our specialist in mediation. He is an attorney for 34 years. Bob, we're talking about mediation. Why is it that investors want to get into mediation to settle their disputes rather than just file lawsuits and run to court?
Mediation, I think, has to be always thought of as one of the tools in any investor's
toolkit.
Toolkit, right?
Okay, so you got to walk in thinking that if you get into a dispute, you want to have mediation as your option first.
Right. You need a litigation system in case you're just dealing with a deadbeat that's not willing to do anything. But the first thing you should think of— Or the
government.
Yeah, okay. But the first thing you have to think about is what are the costs? What's my best alternative? And so the costs of litigation, you've talked about two of them already. The cost of the attorney and the filing fees. I mean, just the filing fees and the court reporter and the attorney can mount up. Each year, it can be quite substantial. The financial costs are the first kind of cost that we think about. Mm-hmm. The time cost, which you've mentioned, is the second kind of cost that we think about. But there's two others that don't normally get thought about, and that is what I call the opportunity cost. It might be related to time, but if you have an investor and they have a choice, do I spend my time with this lawsuit or do I spend my time going out and finding a good investment? Which is better for them? The best thing is to spend your time doing what you do best, which is investing. And if you have to take away from that in order to deal with litigation, that's a significant financial cost to somebody who's in business, trying to make business, trying to find a new client, trying to find a new investment. So the opportunity cost is a significant one that people don't see, but your investors need to see that.
Well, and it's not just the opportunity cost, because the investor then finds himself taken out of the rest of his life to prepare for the court, to prepare for the argument, to prepare to relive all of the trauma that put him in here in the first place. So not only the lost opportunity, but the lost emotions and the conflict in the family. And if you have a spouse, your spouse is not going to be happy and you are not going to be happy. You're going to have arguments about the cost of the litigation, the time loss, the family loss, and wow, it just never ends.
That's what I call my fourth one. I call it stress. I like your term trauma better than stress. But you're not necessarily going to have a heart attack, but man, the stress is there. The trauma is there. It just grates on you. And for example, if you go into business with a brother or sister, and you have a dispute with them, then you've got a family problem, not just an investor problem.
Yeah.
So the stress can be very significant. I had one case where one party on one side says, my sister has told me what to do for 30 years. She's not telling me what to do today.
Oh, boy.
Now, do you think, what drove that mediation?
And is there a resolution? Well, you sure hope so, and you hope it sticks, too. Well, if you've just tuned in, this is Investing Insights with Barry Burnett. I'm your host, Barry Burnett, and I'm talking with attorney Bob Andersen about mediation. And this should be a tool in your toolkit, because if you're an investor, you want to live your life stronger, safer, smarter. And if you plan and knowing that sometimes life has hiccups and sometimes people get sideways and sometimes situations get all screwed up, How do you solve it? Well, if you've got in your toolkit the possibility, the aspect of mediation versus litigation or even arbitration, where there's a final judgment and it may not fall in your favor, well, mediation is part of the solution, right, Bob?
Right.
Okay, give me some examples. Give me the nightmare that we were talking about earlier.
Well, let me give you a simple nightmare.
Yeah.
Not the major nightmare, but you're owed $30,000 in an investment. So you go to court and you get a judgment for $30,000. Do you get your $30,000?
Well, talk to me.
You get a judgment.
Okay.
And if you want your $30,000, you have to go collect it.
Okay.
Okay. What mediation can do for you is, okay, maybe you're going to take less of an actual recovery, but you'll get a judgment without having to go to court and just say, if you don't pay, then the entire judgment will come down on you. That way, they have an incentive to pay. If they have no incentive to pay, sometimes it's very difficult to collect on a judgment.
Well, and you get a judgment for $30,000, but who paid the attorney's fees in the meantime?
You may even get a judgment for the attorney's fees that you had to pay out of your pocket. Let's say you have a judgment for $40,000 or $50,000.
Okay.
But you still have to collect it.
And a lot of judges and a lot of arbitrators aren't holding for attorney's fees at all. So you've paid your attorney's fees. You've paid for the time. You've lost the opportunity. You've been tied up in traumatic knots. Oh boy, this sounds like a lot of fun. But mediation can solve that a lot quicker if people are willing, correct?
Yes, mediation can solve it within weeks. You do need to be prepared. You know, you can't just say, I have a problem. You figure out what the problem is. It's helpful to know, what do you want? And I think the very, very first thing that somebody should do is think of what the other person is thinking. Do they really have a valid perspective? If you're just dealing with a deadbeat who's not going to do anything under any circumstances, you may be stuck with going to trial. But if they have a valid perspective, it is very possible that the judge may actually agree with them.
Okay, now a lot of times the judge may find something totally out of your thinking and your thought process. And that may be because you've been monolithic in your thought, you've been monodirectional, and you haven't been willing to listen to anybody else's ideas. But then you have to assume that the guy on the other side's probably the same, right?
Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Every case is different.
Okay,
I mean, the mediator has to be very sensitive to the fact every case is different. And almost the emotions change during the mediation. I've had mediations where one party who's the problem on one day, the next time we come up for a second day of mediation, they want to solve the problem. So you got to be in the moment. You've got to figure out, okay, what's going to make this work? What solution makes it work? What emotions are at play here that we need to deal with? What's the law that applies?
And have a pen handy to solve it.
Right.
And as soon as everybody agrees, slam it on paper and get done with it.
Yes. Yeah.
Which also stops the attorney's fees.
Right.
Great. Well, this is excellent information. As a guest on this show, mediation and your topic and your content, Bob, is absolutely indispensable. Now, if you're listening to this show and you know someone else who has a lot of really excellent ideas, thoughts, and projections to bring to our listeners, entrepreneurial investors, why don't you contact us at barryburnett.net and let us know that you've got somebody who should come on this show as an expert and share their ideas, thoughts, and concepts to help our investors live stronger, safer, smarter. Because what Bob's sharing is absolutely in that. We have corresponding and cooperating partners that are absolutely spectacular in this field, one of which is Augusta Financial. They've done, Aaron Demaray with Augusta Financial, he has done 703 loans for my clients since 1989, out of 703 that he told me he could do. Is that insane? Aaron Demaray, Augusta Financial, 818-399-1571. It's crazy. I've owned 3 mortgage companies and never come anywhere close to 80% for any of my salespeople or any of my staff. This guy's still batting 1,000 since 1989. That's why we have him on the show, and that's why he's a cooperating partner. And that's why you want to contact barryburnett.net, either to find out who we work with because they are that good, or to be on the show yourself. So please contact us, barryburnett.net. Bob Andersen and I are going to continue talking about mediation and how vital it is. We'll be right back.